Today we're going to be talking more about the Nile River and how it affected Egypt and how it helped develop the civilization there. And then we're going to also start talking about the social classes in ancient Egypt. So you can see here in the directions, first you're going to read the gift of the Nile. And on the second page, there's 3 questions. Now on here, you must include everything that's asked on the second page. Then after you complete this, you're going to read the social classes book pages, and then you will fill out the social classes activity using the social classes book pages. So we'll go ahead and click on the gift of the Nile, the first part here. When you pull it up, it'll pull it up in the PowerPoint, and you want to click Edit in Browser. Once that pulls up, so you'll click Edit Presentation, Edit in Browser. And then once that pulls up, I always like to zoom so I can see it a little bit better. Now you might have view right here, or it may be all squished together, and there might be a little like drop down arrow that you'll need to click, but you'll click view, click zoom. Now I always do 100%, but you could do whatever percent works for you. So as you can see, we have a little bit of reading here on the first page, and then on the second page, you're going to be filling out these. You're going to fill out 3 things that you learned, or 3 facts from the reading. You need to include 3, not 2, not 1, 3. 3 facts or things you learned. Then here you're going to put down 2 interesting facts. So 2 things that are pretty interesting, like, wow, that's pretty neat, that's pretty cool. You must include 2. The words I don't know or IDK do not count as interesting facts. So you need to include 2. Then down here, you must include 1 question. Maybe something that wasn't talked about in there about ancient Egypt, or maybe something you want a little bit more, information on, something from the reading. You have to put down 1 question. You can't put, I don't have a question or nothing. You got to put down 1 question. And on these, if you just click in the text box, you click and then you can start typing. So after the reading, then you will fill in that second page. So we're going to look up here. It says the gift of the Nile. Egypt is located in the Sahara Desert in northern Africa. Normally, people would not want to live in a desert because of the lack of water and vegetation. So vegetation is any plant life. So typically in a desert, there's not a lot of vegetation because there's not a lot of water. In order to live in the desert, people would need to have water to drink and food to eat. However, one of the first great nations was along the Nile River in Egypt. The Nile River is one of the longest rivers that runs south to north and flows into the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile River floods each July through October. So you can see here at the caption, it talks about July to October, the Nile River floods. When the flooding is over in November and the water levels return to normal, the ground that was covered by the flood is covered in black silt. Now we talked about silt with Mesopotamia, and we talked about silt with the Studies Weekly. If you remember, silt is dark, fertile mud, or we said it was dirt with tiny rocks in it, that is perfect for planting crops. Since this flooding happens at the same time every year, people were able to use the flooding to plan their farming. Farmers would plant their seeds in November, and in March, the people harvested the crops. So you can see here with this caption again, in November is when they planted, and then in March they would harvest. They would want to make sure that they harvested and got the field all ready to go before July rolled around again. From there, the cycle would begin again in July with the flood. The Nile River did not just bring fish and fertile soil. It also gave the people a way to travel easily between Upper and Lower Egypt. It is easier to travel by boat on the water than it is to travel across the desert. The desert is hot, it's hard on the animals carrying the items, it's hard on the people. So it'd be much easier to travel by boat on the water than to travel across the desert. For many years, Egypt was separated into these two parts. So the Upper Egypt and then the Lower Egypt. If you remember, it's kind of backwards of what we think because of how the Nile River flows. So remember, Lower Egypt is downriver and Upper Egypt is upriver. Each part of Egypt had its own king, and it wasn't until King Menes built a capital city near the border of where the two lands met that the kingdoms joined and formed one great nation ruled by King Menes. The civilization that lasted nearly 3,000 years. And if you remember, King Menes was the first pharaoh of Egypt. So now using what I just read, you're going to go to that second page, fill out 3 things you learned or 3 facts, 2 interesting facts, and 1 question. When you get those filled in, then you'll click close and we'll move on to the second one. So now we're going to talk about the social classes, the way that things were set up. And when we read the book pages, you'll be completing this activity as well or completing it after. So what you're going to do is you're going to click Edit in Presentation, Edit in PowerPoint, or Edit in Browser. Or it'll open up something different. So Edit Presentation, Edit in Browser, and then again, I always like to zoom, but you might not want to zoom on this one because we'll be sorting some items here. It's up to you either way, though. So what you're going to do on this activity is after we read about the social classes, you're going to decide where these different people groups went. We have upper class, middle class, lower class. So you're going to go through each one, decide, key government officials. Were they in upper class? Were they in middle class? Or were they in lower class? So you're going to go through each of these and sort the text box according to what class it belonged in. And then once you complete that, you'll click Close, and then you would click Submit. So making sure you fill out Gift of the Nile, fill out social classes, which we'll read through the book pages, and then you fill out the social classes and click Submit. So we're going to go ahead and read these book pages, and then you will fill out the activity. So the Old Kingdom, Section 2. So we're going to start here. If you were there. You are a peasant farmer in ancient Egypt. To you, the pharaoh is a god, descendant of the sun god Re. You depend on his strength and wisdom. For part of the year, you are busy planting crops in your field. But at other times, you work for the pharaoh. You are currently helping to build a great tomb in which the pharaoh and many of his belongings will be buried when he dies. Building background. As in other ancient cultures, Egyptian society was based on a strict order of social classes. A small group of royalty, nobles and priests, ruled Egypt. So they were in charge. They took over, or were in charge of Egypt. They made the decisions. They depended on the rest of the population to supply foods, crafts, and labors. Crafts meaning like different things that were made, like tools, weapons. Few people questioned this arrangement of society. Now we're here to early Egyptian society. The first and second dynasties ruled Egypt for about 4 centuries. So if you remember, a dynasty is a family of rulers. So it'd be like a father and his son and then the next son. So they'd be a dynasty. And so there was 2 different families that ruled for about 4 centuries, which is about 400 years. Around 2700 BC, the 3rd dynasty rose to power. Its rule began the Old Kingdom, a period in Egyptian history that lasted from about 2700 BC to 2200 BC. Ruled by pharaohs. During the Old Kingdom, the Egyptians continued to develop their political system, or the way their government ran. This system was based on the belief that the pharaoh is both a king and a god. The ancient Egyptians believed that Egypt belonged to the gods. So their belief was that Egypt was the best. It belonged to the gods. It was the center of everything. They believed that the pharaoh had come to earth to manage Egypt for the rest of the gods. So they believed that the pharaoh was a god that came to earth to take care of Egypt. As a result, he had absolute power over all the land and people in Egypt. But the pharaoh's status as a god came with many responsibilities. People blamed him if crops did not grow well or if disease struck. They also demanded that the pharaoh make trade profitable, so meaning they make money trading with other countries, and prevent wars. During the Old Kingdom, the duties of the pharaohs grew, meaning they had more things they were in charge of. To help carry out these duties and jobs, the pharaohs hired government officials. Most officials came from the pharaoh's family. So it paid off to be in the family of the pharaoh. So it'd be like cousins, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews would be the ones who would be those government officials. The most famous pharaoh of the Old Kingdom was Khufu, who ruled in the 2500s BC. Egyptian legends said that he was cruel, but historical records tell us that the people who worked for him were well fed. Khufu is best known for the monuments that were built to him. The social structure. So now is where we're getting more into, okay, so we know Pharaoh's at the top, but what was the order of the people below him? By 2200 BC, Egypt had about 2 million people living there. At the top of Egyptian society, obviously, was the pharaoh. So the pharaoh was at the top, you can see here. Just below him were the upper classes, which included the priests, so the people who carried out the religious ceremonies, and then those key government officials. Many of these priests and officials were nobles, or people from rich and powerful families. So the people who had money and lots of power were the ones who got the most sought after high jobs in the social hierarchy, the most well-paying jobs as well. So our upper class, we're looking at the pharaoh, the key government officials, the priests. Those were the ones who made up the upper class. And then just below them, the nobles, was the middle class of lesser government officials. So, you know, people who might be in charge of a small project but weren't really high up there in the decision making. Scribes, who, if you remember, were professional writers. Craftspeople, so people who made things, you know, like the tools, the weapons, different things like that. And the merchants, people, you know, like shop owners, traders, that kind of thing. Egypt's lower class, which was about 80% of the population. So this top here was only about 20% of the people living in Egypt. But this lower class was 80% of the people who lived in Egypt. But it was made up mostly of farmers. During flood season, when they could not work the fields, farmers worked on Pharaoh's building projects. Below farmers in the social order were slaves and servants. So you can see here the upper class again was the pharaoh, the key government officials and the priests. Here were the scribes, the craftspeople, the merchants. Soldiers were also here in this middle class. And then in the lower class was the farmers, servants, and slaves. So you're going to now use this information to help you complete the sorting activity on social classes. Again, once you get both the gift of the Nile filled out and these social classes, you'll click turn it in. If you have any questions, send me an email, send me a chat through Teams, or send me a message on Remind.